Well, good morning, Canada. Happy Friday to you. It's the first sip here on Bakes on Things. Cheers to you if you're drinking coffee or tea with me this morning. Whew, it's been a week, hasn't it? Let's talk about the upcoming 2025-2026 federal budget. Just a day over, a month away. The Parliamentary Budget Officer, Canada's top fiscal watchdog, well, he didn't just sound the alarm this week, did he? He described what he saw as stupefying. How often do you hear that word about anything the government does? His words, not mine. He called Canada's fiscal outlook dire. And when a numbers guy like the PBO starts reaching for words like that, you know that it's pretty damn serious in a country right now. And here's the reality. Canada is staring down deficits that keep on ballooning out of control. Debt to GDP ratios climbing with no end in sight, and interest payments on our national debt that are starting to eat away at the very core of our ability to fund our social programs. The Liberals once promised that they would be disciplined. They promised us that they would have fiscal anchors. They promised us that the debt to GDP would decline. And all of these promises, every single last one of them, is gone. Let's go.
Welcome to Bakes on Things.
Building on the statement from the governor today, it's evident that the Canadian economy is not necessarily in the best shape. I think, as the governor put it, it doesn't necessarily feel particularly rosy out there right now. Even if we're going to have positive growth going forward, it's not going to feel particularly great. And there's a direct linkage with respect to the state of the nation's finances, so the government's budget deficit. As you probably are aware, we published our last economic and fiscal outlook just before the election. And things have gotten a little bit worse since that time on the economic side. Certainly, uncertainty has continued to persist. It's certainly built with respect, uncertainty certainly increased with respect to our trade with the U.S. and the potential outcome of trade agreement renegotiations. And you're really starting to see it in terms of on the side of business investment and also some impacts on labor markets. So, of course, over the course of the summer, 100,000 Canadians losing their jobs. So it's not necessarily the economic side. And of course, if you don't have a job, you're not paying taxes. You expect some sort of supports from the government, either through employment insurance or other types of supports. And of course, the combination of lower revenues and higher expenses means higher deficits overall.
There's a lot of focus, obviously, on this budget. I know you're well aware of that. We haven't had a budget since April of 2024. How important is this one?
I'm at great pains not to engage in hyperbole. So this budget ends up being important.
You're definitely not a politician then, yeah.
No, this is easily one of the most important. It's one of the most important budgets that I've probably seen since I started working in the Department of Finance in 1998. So we have a budget where it needs to address a fundamental assumption in our economy and how our economy worked, and that was we are tied at the hip with the United States, and that's gone. So all of our historical economic modeling that was based upon the idea that don't worry, as the U.S. recovers and grows again in 2, 3, 4 years, we have those connections and those supply chains, and things will start to take off for us. That's gone out the window at this point. Again, going back to the point that the governor made today with respect to monetary policy, he indicated there's no going back, there's only going forward. And in the case of monetary policy can help in the transition. It can't necessarily fix all the problems. I think the other aspect, and something we're really interested in and we're watching carefully, is the government's indicated that they're planning on changing the overall presentation of the budget. So going from what people are kind of used to, so a bottom line, deficit, surplus, how much money you're borrowing, that type of thing, to having those numbers and then also presenting things a little bit differently. The government hasn't clearly indicated what they have planned at this point, but that's something we're watching carefully.
They haven't communicated that to your office yet? Because I know a number of months ago, your predecessor also said, like, I don't know what the difference will be yet. Like, I don't know how they're going to define it.
Yeah, they've consulted with us on some ideas, and at this point, we're still waiting until budget 2025. And on our end, obviously, if you have a really important budget, probably, as I mentioned, and critically important budget that parliamentarians are going to be voting on, having multiple votes on very soon, if things are presented differently, if they can't quite understand what's in there, then obviously for us, the Parliamentary Budget Office, the organization that supports parliamentarians of all stripes, regardless of whether they're good with calculators or not, we need to make sure that they're supported in understanding what the government's actually proposing.
Do you anticipate you'll know what the difference is prior to the tabling of the budget, or do you think you'll find out with the rest of us?
If history is a leading indicator, probably at the exact same time. Again, I go back to the fact that the government hasn't actually offered a clear definition of what operating and capital are at this point. So we're kind of shadow boxing with definitions, like they say they're going to close the operating budget or close the deficit in the operating budget. To determine whether that's reasonable or not, somebody actually has to define what the operating budget is. That said, for the order of magnitude that you're looking at, it would be highly unlikely that you'd be able to close a deficit or reach a number that big without the path going through personnel costs. So without some sort of reduction or substantial changes in the composition of the public service. Because something else the government's indicated, so there have been a lot of messaging, not necessarily all of it consistent up to this point.
Fair.
But something they've also indicated is that they're planning on expanding in some areas. So they talked about the Canadian Forces, Canadian Border Services, and I think those plans are already being implemented. So they're expanding in some areas on top of the potential 15% or $15 billion worth of cuts. So one can anticipate that there might be some movement on that front. It makes it really complicated if the only mechanism to reduce the overall size of the public service is attrition. I enjoy lunch and meats, so I trust the food inspectors to go out. Potentially the food inspectors are all really old, and potentially they're going to retire over the next 3 to 4 years. I hope those food inspectors are going to be replaced,
right.
And I hope that the young people that are preparing PowerPoint presentations for their executives that never see the light of day in the government department of your choice, potentially those people, you can shift some of those resources around so I can still enjoy my lunch and meats. But potentially, and that's the risk with attrition, it just becomes really complicated to end up hitting your targets and also manage the public service. Because, and something I think my predecessor indicated, it really isn't, the numbers around the public service, the size, it's really big. Like, you can't get away from it. Like an $80 billion wage bill, $172,000 a year in average compensation. And at the same time, they're all linked to something. They're all linked to a program, a specific program. And if you're focused on simply reducing the people that you've hired and you haven't taken a hard look at the programs that are actually being implemented and set priorities, potentially you're focusing on the wrong things and you're making things more challenging for yourself.
Welcome back to Bakes on Things. It is the first sip. Welcome to your Friday as well. I'm sure it's bright and early for you as it is for me. The numbers you just heard are jaw-dropping. Deficits not in the billions, not even in the tens of billions. And this is happening year after year, stacked one on top of another. Spending commitments that aren't being matched by revenue growth in this country. And what's worse, the Liberals admit they don't even have a fiscal anchor anymore. No plan, no hard stop, just more borrowing, more promises, and more debt shoved onto the backs of present and future Canadians. That's what they have. We are entering an era, and it's a dangerous era. We are entering an era where interest payments alone are one of the fastest growing line items in the budget. 13 cents of every tax dollar collected simply goes to the debt's interest payments. That means less money for healthcare, less money for infrastructure, less money for defense. Because Ottawa just can't put away the damn credit cards, can they? They just can't stop swiping. And There is precedent around the world for all of this as well, and where this kind of stuff has happened before, things did not go well. I want you to think about where this road leads, because history does give us plenty of examples around the world. The first example is fairly recent in Venezuela. They were once one of the wealthiest countries in Latin America. They were oil-rich, export powerhouse as well, and then came runaway deficits, reckless spending, and political leaders who told the public, "Oh, don't you worry, the money would always be there." Sounds pretty darn familiar, doesn't it? It doesn't end here, though. They ended up with hyperinflation, currency collapse, and one of the worst humanitarian crises of the modern era. The only one we haven't started here in Canada is the last one, and we could be not far away from it. Let's hope not. Then if we go a little further back in time to Iceland in 2008, they're small but a perfect case study here. Because before its 2008 crash, its leaders bragged to the world about Iceland's pure stability. Then came unchecked borrowing, over-leveraged banks, and government mismanagement through the roof. It took IMF, International Monetary Fund bailouts, and a near total collapse of the financial system in Iceland to finally set them on the straight path again. Argentina, also more recent, although thank goodness they now have a conservative leader making change, but they are a serial offender. Sky-high deficits, constant printing of money, and leaders who always kicked the can down the road. Where did it land them? Triple-digit inflation is where it landed them, repeated defaults on their debts, and a generation of lost economic credibility in that country. These aren't wild comparisons. They're not wild at all, because for the most part, we're already there. They are warnings. Canada is now walking down the same path as those countries. The PBO isn't crying wolf here. He's saying we are heading toward the cliff. In fact, if we don't hit the brakes, we're heading hurtling over that cliff while looking down at the same time. And those are consequences that fall into play here. So here's the thing. What happens if we don't change course and we drive right off that cliff? Well, first, we're going to see more investor flight from this country. We're already seeing international investors flee this country for other places. But international capital doesn't like uncertainty. If bond markets believe that Canada can't control its spending anymore, they demand higher interest rates. And that makes borrowing even more expensive and accelerates the spiral Canada's in now. In fact, we might already be swirling at the top of that funnel cloud. Second, credit downgrades. You might think this isn't coming, but it's not far off. Remember when Canada was proud to be one of the world's most fiscally disciplined nations? Well, that reputation is long gone in this world. Credit downgrades will just be next and make it harder for Canada to compete for capital against the US, Europe, and other emerging economies that we are seeing throughout the world today. Third, a weaker dollar. And here's the thing. We already have a weak dollar. Can we afford for it to get weaker? If investors dump Canadian assets, the loonie will continue its slide. That means higher prices for imports, everything from groceries to gas, which are already astronomically high today, making inflation worse and hitting working families across this country the hardest. And then fourth and final, it's political instability. When governments can't pay for the promises that they have made to you and I, when social programs face cuts like they do in this upcoming budget, when taxes rise just to cover interest payments, public trust absolutely collapses. That's the real danger. So who's to blame for all of this? And unfortunately, we can't go back very far in time to place the blame. We can't blame Stephen Harper's government. We can't blame even liberal governments before him. Let's place the blame where it belongs, and that is squarely at the feet of the current Liberal Party. For a decade, they promised discipline and delivered chaos. Trudeau promised modest deficits. Carney promised he'd be the adult in the room, the budgeter, the accountant, the banker. Instead, they doubled down on reckless spending, hollow slogans, and economic complete mismanagement. They made Canada vulnerable, and that's where we sit even today. They have told us Canadians that Canada would be an energy superpower. But they just keep saying that phrase and don't act on it at all. They also strangled our energy sector with Bill C-69, killing billions in revenue. They told us trade would save us, but then they botched the relationships with our biggest trade partner to the south. They have no other trade deals, all fake deals that have been made while spending your money to travel. They told us the middle class would thrive, but families are watching their savings disappear into higher interest rates and excessive inflation. Every one of these outcomes is tied to no one else but liberals. It is tied to liberal policy. So you might sit there and ask yourself, well, what's the solution now? Can we stop from driving over that cliff? Well, the answer is hard to say because honestly, we're out of easy answers. The damage is really that bad. But there are only a few real solutions that we can kind of look to that might help us out here, but all of them need to start literally today. Cut wasteful spending immediately. No more boutique programs designed to buy liberal votes. No more billions in Ukrainian aid. No more billions in African aid. Basically, no more billions in foreign giveaways while Canadians at home and all their families suffer. We need to restore fiscal anchors, set a hard target for debt to GDP, make it a binding target, and rebuild credibility with the world's international investors. Grow the economy through productivity. That means energy projects, not just announced, not through any kind of project office. Energy projects where shovels have gone into the ground, trade deals that actually exist, and tax policy that rewards investment, not punishes it. Remember when Pierre Poilievre had a TFSA idea? You could get more limit on your TFSA if you put into Canadian companies? Steal that. Independent oversight. Give the Parliamentary Budget Officer more power to hold the government accountable. If politicians won't respect the numbers, then the numbers must be forced into the spotlight. And finally, to wrap all of this up on your Friday, and let's try to keep it positive as best we can, but the PBO, Parliamentary Budget Officer, they're right. I mean, that's the bottom line here. Canada's fiscal situation is pretty dire. The deficits are definitely stupefying, and the consequences are real. It's not abstract, it's not distant, it's not hypothetical anymore. We are already on the road that led Venezuela, Iceland, and Argentina into their crises, and now we're headed quickly into our own. The Liberals own this disaster too. Trudeau started it, but Mark Carney is doubling down on it. And if Canadians don't demand real change now, if the collapse comes, if the collapse itself will come faster than anyone expects if we don't make real change now. And so Canada, we used to be the example of stability, as we said. Now we're the cautionary tale in the world. We're a cautionary tale in waiting. And that is the tragic legacy of a decade of liberal lies, reckless spending, and economic betrayal. Whew. It's Friday at least, though, right? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and of course, join the conversation about this down below. I want to hear your ideas. How can we turn this around? Can we turn this around? Do you place all the blame at the Liberals' feet? Are there other governments involved here that we didn't really think about in this episode? Put it all down. We'll be back at 6 p.m. with our last word of the day. That, of course, is followed by our weekend wrap on Saturday mornings. So don't forget to catch all of those episodes. And of course, thank you for catching this one. I wish you a fantastic end to your week and a fantastic Friday. And we will see you this evening on The Last Word.